Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. I just got through watching the run of Netflix's Luke Cage, and after taking a look at the entire season, I see some issues with the series that need to be worked on and areas that the producers could work on for the second season. Now, while I really enjoyed Netflix's Luke Cage and all the episodes, again, these are some areas that the producers really need to work on. Now, the first issue that I have with Netflix's Luke Cage is the writing. While the first 6 or 7 episodes of Luke Cage are rock solid and incredibly consistent, it seems after the death of Cottonmouth that the series starts to fall apart in the writing department. It's after this episode that we see the series really starting to have issues with the pacing of the storylines and the development of several characters in the storyline. Now, the Luke Cage series, one of the strong points I see is the slow and methodical pacing. And that pacing really gets you to think about what the characters are doing, what their motivations are, and it really gets you to really start to take a look at all the beautiful cinematography and again the actions of the character. Now, after the death of Cottonmouth, we really start to see the pacing start to get a little jumbled, and the storylines get to be a little uneven because it seems like after you take away from the two great villains, Mariah Crawford and Cottonmouth, the series starts to struggle because it seems like when the Diamondback character is brought in, the series really starts to lose its momentum. Because when I look at the Diamondback character, he is one of the weakest villains I have ever seen, in a Marvel Studios project. Now, Mariah Crawford and Cornell Cottonmouth Stokes, they fit organically into the Luke Cage series. They fit into the storyline. They were, seamless, and they transitioned well into each episode organically. Same thing with Shades. Shades is a well-developed character. But the issue I have with this whole Diamondback character is that he's just so all over the place as a character. He's not a strong character. Yeah, they make it like he's Luke Cage's half brother, but that really, I liked a lot one part of that with him being the pastor's illegitimate son. That was a good point. But when we look at the character of Diamondback, after you look at his foundations like his single mother household and his daddy issues, the big problem with Diamondback is that, yes, the character is, they were trying to make a point that the character is emotional, but he's so over the top. He starts reminding me of old 1980s villains like Cobra Commander and Starscream. That's how over the top this Diamondback character is. And when I look at that type of character, I can't see him as someone who would scare characters like Shades, Mariah Crawford, or Cornell Cottonmouth Stokes. I look at those three characters and how intelligent and how methodical those characters are, and I don't see them seeing this guy as someone they would feel threatened by. In fact, when I look at those three characters, I would see them as the kind of characters who would be making efforts to pretty much take this guy out because of him being so emotional, so melodramatic, and so ridiculous. Because this guy, as I see it, he's not much of a threat. When I look at the earlier episodes when Pop got killed, and I look at the way Cottonmouth dealt with that guy who went over emotional, I see him, Cottonmouth, doing the exact same thing to Diamondback that he would have done to that guy who shot up Pop's barbershop. Because in that episode, they were making a point about how these guys from these single mother households are emotional and how they do things to get attention, not seeing how their behaviors pretty much damage all the things that need to be done. They pretty much bring attention to themselves that doesn't need to be brought to themselves. And this is what Diamondback was doing a couple of episodes later. So that was an issue I have with the writing being slightly inconsistent, and the development of this character being inconsistent. Because I look at that character, and he pretty much, he was the wrong character for that series. I mean, the way they developed him was, it just didn't fit organically. He wasn't seeming like someone you would see as a mastermind or a credible threat. His over the top, ridiculous behaviors, just didn't flow seamlessly into the series. Now, the other issue I have with Netflix's Luke Cage is another issue I have always had with these Marvel Studios films. And when it comes down to these Marvel Studios films, and even some of these TV series, again, they have a problem with finishing strong. And when it comes down to the third act of a Marvel Studios film or a Marvel Studios television project like Luke Cage, that third act is where they struggle. And when we look at the Diamondback character and the third act of Luke Cage, again, we see the issues they have with finishing strong. Now, I know how important it is to finish strong because that third act, again, is the one that not only ends the story, but gets the readers or the viewers excited to go out here and continue watching the series. And when you don't finish a third act strong, it doesn't give people incentive to keep watching the series or invest in the second season. This is one of the problems that Marvel Studios has struggled with their films and television shows, and it's an issue I don't see them really making efforts to deal with. Yes, these shows and these movies are popular, but this could be the Achilles heel for Marvel Studios is that third act. And when I look at Luke Cage, the third act just pretty much collapsed. And when I looked at the finale, it was one of the most jumbled episodes I saw. It looks like they were just trying to cram as much story and finish all the storylines in one episode without any sort of thought to structure, pacing, or flow. And you really have to think about those things when you're doing serialized storytelling. Because whenever I do, a story like The Temptation of John Haynes, and I have to have it flow into another story like Man Who Rules the World, I really have to think about the third act more than anything else. Because, again, the third act of a story pretty much sets up the next story or gets people excited for the next story. And when you don't focus on your third act and finishing strong, it really does not motivate people to continue to get involved with a series. You really have to focus on that third act. Act 3 is just as important as Act 1. And that's because Act 3 is where the climax of the story reaches and you come to the conclusion. And when I look at the Diamondback Luke Cage fight, it was kind of anticlimactic. It didn't really, build into this, get you into it type scene. It was really, it just happened, and then the rest of the episode goes on, and they're trying to tie up all the ends of the story. And you really, again, you want people to be excited with that third act. You really want to get them excited. Because I remember when I was writing Temptation of John Haynes, and I said to myself, I really need this third act to explode. I really need this to, have big action. And building up into that climax where this Eastern character reveals herself, this had to be something, powerful. So that third act really has to really grab the reader and grab the viewer and keep them into it. Now, the conclusion, yeah, you can have a conclusion that wraps everything up, but that climax has to pay off. That's where you pay off everything you set up in the first act. So this is something that, the writers really need to work on because, again, it felt in some parts disjointed, parts of Luke Cage right after Cottonmouth was killed. Because after Cottonmouth got killed, yeah, we saw Mariah turn into a much more dangerous person in her character transformation arc. But the introduction of Diamondback, pretty much, he was supposed to feel like some sort of threat, but I didn't really feel a threat from him. Again, he felt like Starscream or Cobra Commander, and Shades felt more methodical, and he felt more like a villain, again, who felt like a credible threat to Cage. I'm hoping for season 2 that we see more gritty type villains in Luke Cage, because the gritty villains really worked in the comic and they also work here very well. You really need those gritty type villains for this type of series, because what makes Cage work is, again, it's it being more cerebral and more of a series, more street oriented, more of a, as I see it, kind of a detective type series, and that's what really makes the series work. I really don't want to see more of those Diamondback type villains, because he's kind of ridiculous, and that would be a step in the wrong direction. Because when I look at the Diamondback character, again, he's just too cartoonish, too silly, and that type of character really doesn't work for Luke Cage. But these are the areas that the producers of this series really need to work on. I mean, it's a great series, but you can always improve, and that's something I've learned as a writer for many years, is that I could always improve. There are always areas that I can work on to get better, and the producers of this series have other areas that they can work on to get better and make this one of the best Netflix series on Netflix so far. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.